Hi guys, this is Sean from Play by Boss. It has been a while since the last video. Thank you so much for your patience and I hope everything is good. So I've been using Sony mirrorless camera for a while. Currently I'm using an A7S III for most of my video projects and I love that cameras a lot because it kind of suits my shooting style. Then, Sony released their cinema camera, the Sony FX3, which is pretty much the same as the A7S III, but they kind of redesigned it so that it focuses more into video shooter. Now, Sony released their new cinema lineup camera, the FX30, which looks pretty much the same as the FX3, but with some minor differences, which I'm going to talk about later. So based on my understanding, Sony was hoping to offer a more budget-friendly cinema cameras for content creators and filmmakers who just started off and want to get in hand into some pro video features. So I'm going to get into this camera right now. So let's talk about the sensor. This is an APS-C 4K 20.1 megapixel cinema cameras, which means it has a 1.5 crop factors. It can shoot 10-bit 422 internally and 16-bit RAW external with an HDMI cable. It builds and feels like a Sony FX3. It comes with all the mount screws and fans behind the monitor. It has an ISO range of 100 to 32,000. It can shoot 4K 60 frames per second without any crop, 4K 120 frames per second or Full HD 240 frames per second with a roughly 38% crop. External handle for extra handle and extra input, and all these cost between 2200 to 2800 USD depending on the kits that you purchase. In this video, I just want to talk about the things that I like and dislike about the FX30. The first thing I would like to talk about is the new firmware update for the FX30. Shooting an S-Log has never been easy compared to other picture profiles because it's too flat to monitor. Now you can solve this by importing your own LUTs from your computer to the camera using an SD card and monitoring it with the LUTs that you want. This allows you to have an easier visibility while filming log. Moreover, it creates a smoother workflow by enabling the cine EI quick and flexible ISOs for shootings with the S-Log 3. This will help you to have a better preview while maximizing the dynamic range. Speaking about that, the new firmware comes with 3 types of shooting modes, which is the cine EI quick and flexible ISO modes. All these pro features was taken by a higher-end cinema cameras, and these, I would say, dedicated for log users who wants additional ways to control the relationship between exposure, amplifications, and response curve. Mainly, you need to focus on is the Cine EI. It is a cinema industry standards of ISO where you can get the maximum image quality and dynamic range in S-Log 3 in the simplest and easiest way. There are only 2 ISO you need to work on and focus on, which is the low base ISO 800 and high base ISO 2500. As you can see, it will not affect the final image even though I'm changing the exposure. The main ideas of having this feature is to ensure user not to mess with other ISO and stick with the best ISO from the camera itself. I don't really shoot log, but I'm sure that this feature is going to be very beneficial for log users who want to keep things simple yet get the best image quality. Next, focus breathing compensations. This thing blows my mind because it kind of solves the most, I would say, one of the most common problems from the photographic lenses. So let me get it straight. Focus breathing is when a lens focal length changes subtly as you focus near and far or vice versa. It looks like your lens is doing all this zooming in and out effect. Many photographers might not have heard of this before, but I'm sure videographers know what I'm saying. So video and cinema lenses have been working focus breathing for many years, and I'm sure they perform pretty well on that. Now, other manufacturers like Sony has been working very hard for their photographic lenses, and I think they work pretty well, especially for those higher-end lenses like G or GM lenses. This doesn't stop there. Sony released these new focus breathing features for their new cameras such as the A7 IV, FX6, and now the FX30. I really hope Sony can implement these features to other cameras, especially the A7S III, You know, A7S3 is pretty expensive when compared to FX30 and A7 IV, and I do believe they deserve it. So the focus breathing compensations functions adjust the size of framing dynamically in camera during video recording by applying a certain percentage of crop in order to minimize this phenomena. This sounds pretty neat, but there's a catch. Not all Sony lenses are compatible with this feature. As far as I know, the G and GM series lenses are compatible with this feature, and probably some other standard lenses are compatible with these features. Unfortunately, some others, more budget-friendly lenses are not in the list yet. For example, the Nifty 50mm f1.8. That lens has a pretty serious focus breathing issue, and I thought these new features is able to fix that. Unfortunately, it's not in the list yet. I hope Sony can update this firmware as soon as possible and make this possible for other lenses. You may find the compatible lenses from their official website, which I'm gonna link it down below. Next up, focus mapping is a pretty new feature that I just found out after receiving the FX30. I have a love and hate relationship with this feature, but I'm gonna stop with the things that I love before I jump to the things that I don't like about it. So I believe most of people know what is focus picking. Basically, focus picking is a focus assist function that helps you to nail the focus correctly. It's very useful, but the downside is it's pretty hard to see, especially when you have smaller screens like a mirrorless camera. On the other hand, the new focus mapping solves this problem by showing you the focus area and depth using color block. The red means foreground, the blue is out of focus area, and the non-block area is where it focuses. I guess this feature can be pretty useful for certain scenarios such as interview, because you do not need to, punch in your shots using the focus magnifier to check the focus. And the focus picking can be pretty irritating because the line is so thin. Even though the focus mapping feature is pretty neat and functional, but there's two things that I don't like. The first is you can't use this focus mapping when you're using a manual lens. This is definitely a big downside on these features because the whole idea of using focus assist is to help you to nail your focus since you couldn't rely on autofocus. And it kind of defeats the purpose when you can't use it on a manual lens. Secondly, you can't control the opacity of the color block. Some scenarios where there's a lot of details in the scenes is pretty distracting with all the color blocks. Somehow you hope you can tone down the opacity so that you can monitor your scene clearer. Next, I'm going to talk about rolling shutters or jello effects. I've never encountered troubles with rolling shutters before because I don't really pan a lot for my shooting style, but I do believe some filmmakers are very particular in these, and that's the reason why I'm going to talk about this. Based on my understanding, rolling shutters happens when you pan your shots or follow a moving subject. So I was curious how this APS-C sensor performs when it compares to a full-frame sensor like a FX3 or A7S3. So I'm just going to conduct a test between this FX30 and the A7S3 since I do not have a FX3 in my hands, but you will get an idea. As you can see, there's pretty significant rolling shutters on the FX30 compared to A7S3. It's not drastically different, but you can feel there's more rolling shutters when you put them side by side. Something to keep in mind, I'm not an expert in terms of rolling shutters. I'm not too sure why the FX30 has more rolling shutters compared to A7S3, but based on my research, I do realize that FX30 only offers you electronic shutters. When it compares to A7S3, it offers you both mechanical and electronic shutters. And my understanding, the rolling shutters tends to happens more for electronic shutters. I'm not saying that electronic shutter is bad, but electronic shutters shines at its own way, I would say. You can shoot silence modes with electronic shutters. The last thing I'll talk about is sensor size. I love full frame because it works better in low lights, it has more lens choice, and also it's much more flexible for my shooting style. The FX30 has an APS-C sensor, but it surprised me in many ways. So it's much sharper, I would say, and it performed pretty well in terms of low lights. I did a quick test between the A7S3 and also the FX30, and let's have a look. I believe whoever is going to get the cinema lineup cameras probably wouldn't bother much about low lights, because whoever is going to pick up cinema cameras like the FX3, FX30, FX6, they'll probably use those cameras for short films, probably commercials, and most of these projects would have more controls in terms of lights. So I don't think it's going to be a huge issue if you're using this type of camera for this type of shoots, because you're able to expose the shots the way that you want without worrying about the noise and also low lights. Alright, let's wrap this up. So who is this for? I think this is a great camera for a person who just started off filmmaking journey, who want to try out cinema camera in a more budget-friendly way. And I personally think that this is going to be a great second camera for advanced filmmakers who already own an FX3, because it shares a very similar DNA. It has the same design, same ergonomics and design, and they can shoot 4K 10-bit 422 and also 16-bit RAW externally. So I think it's going to be a perfect match if you have the FX3. As A7S3 user point of view, I think FX30 is a great camera because the design of it is a great, easy use filmmaking cameras. You can just mount extra monitor without any cage, and it's very reliable because of the extra fan behind the monitor. So we can really use it for a long period of time without worrying over heats when it compares to A7S3. So all in all, I think FX3 is a great camera, even though there's a few quirks. But trust me, there wouldn't be any perfect cameras. You just have to find a balance between how you shoot it, how do you use it, and also the cost. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. If you guys do enjoy this video, share this video, like and subscribe our channel. And as always, create, learn, and have fun. I'll see you guys in the next video.